Hey guys, today we stand at the edge of something you've carried all along. Like a current running beneath the pavement, you've walked on 1,000 times without hearing its song. You feel it now, this invisible pressure beneath your ribs, a quiet insistence that whatever you've been chasing isn't missing. It's been waiting for your attention. Picture the morning light sliding through a cracked window, catching dust motes that had been drifting for years. And then suddenly, one of them glows like it was always meant to shine. Reality doesn't need to be created. It needs to be remembered. There's a force inside you that never stopped moving. It didn't sleep. It didn't go anywhere. You just stopped listening. Mira ran a tiny stall outside the market, stirring jasmine tea from the same pot she'd used since she was 16. Customers came. Some whispered thanks, some paid grudgingly. And she moved through the rhythm like many did, efficient, quiet, believing her impact was small. One wet morning, her usual rhythm was interrupted by a child who dropped his cup. She bent, picked it up, and instead of muttering about bad luck, she breathed in and whispered to herself, "I am the warmth they seek." No flashy spell, no external validation, just that alignment in a single breath. The next few hours, people lingered longer, tipping more, asking her about the recipe. Her tea hadn't changed, her hands hadn't learned new motion, but something in the air felt different. That was the moment she remembered. You must understand, the force you think you have to find, earn, or chase has never been absent. It's not somewhere beyond you. It's the current under your footsteps, the unspoken confidence before the first word, the energy that shaped every choice you'd already made long before you understood why. Like a river running beneath a road, it has carved the landscape of your life whether you named it or not. Recognition isn't acquisition, it is awakening. When Mira spoke her truth, "I am the warmth they seek," she didn't ask permission, she didn't bargain. She simply remembered who she already was broadcasting. This force responds to your internal signal. You don't amplify it by trying harder outside. You tune into it inside. Think of yourself as a radio that's been set incorrectly for years. Static, fuzz, half-heard messages. The station has always been playing. The adjustment wasn't about turning louder. It was about aligning the dial. The moment you feel and say, "I have always carried this," the interference lessens. Your frequency clears. Contrast the difference between seeking and remembering. Seeking puts you someplace separate from what you want, as if the power is out there, over the horizon, needing effort, qualification, the right circumstances. Remembering collapses the distance. It shifts your posture from chasing to receiving. You don't approach life with a begging hand. You step forward with a knowing one. That knowing broadcasts a different signal to the world, and the world replies, not because you convinced it, but because you've become a clear transmitter of what already is. Practice the awakening right now. First, internal. Place your hand over your heart. Say aloud, slowly, with feeling, "I have always had this force. I choose to remember it now." Let the words ripple through your body. Don't rush. Feel the subtle shifts, the small release of tension, the tiny expansion behind your sternum. Then, external. Do one small act that reflects that internal alignment. It could be offering sincere gratitude to someone without expectation, taking a confident posture before speaking, or making a decision without weighing every fear, something that looks like the version of you who already knows. calibration matters. If after a few days you feel the old weight creeping back, doubt, hesitation, that sensation of needing to prove, you use the checklist. Mindar 1. Is there a conflicting thought whispering that you're not enough? 2. Are you waiting for someone else to validate it before acting? 3. Are you slipping into old habits of trying harder instead of tuning clearer? When you find the friction, pause, breathe, repeat your internal declaration, and choose one micro action that reflects the remembered force, not the borrowed one. This is not a temporary pep talk. It's a reset of identity. You're not becoming powerful. You're remembering your current frequency and living from it. Speak it. Act from it. Watch how small adjustments, because awareness is that small and that powerful, begin to realign the field around you. Slow down now. Let the revelation settle like soft rain. You don't have to sprint into proof. The force inside you is not anxious, it's patient. When you quiet the noise, comparison, past judgments, the pressure to perform, you create the sacred space where remembrance breathes. Sit with this truth for a moment. You're not chasing something missing. You're reconnecting with what has always been yours. Hold that connection gently. In the stillness, feel the weight shift from scarcity to presence. Let this become your foundation. The quiet knowing that whatever happens next flows from a force that isn't new, just newly seen. You already felt the stir in the last moment. Now understand how the field replies. It's not delayed because the universe is indecisive. It's immediate because it's listening to the frequency you're broadcasting, not the words you're muttering under your breath. Take Jonah, a mid-level engineer who'd spent years saving, planning, and preparing for the right time to present his idea. He rehearsed the pitch, polished the slides, and still felt like he was begging for approval. One morning, instead of polishing again, he sat in silence and placed his hands on the desk and whispered, "I am the engineer who builds what matters. My ideas move people." He felt something settle, not grand, just a subtle internal alignment. He didn't broadcast it outward with anxiety or pushiness. Later that afternoon, a senior leader wandered into his area, heard part of a conversation, and invited him to present without Jonah asking, without him chasing. The alignment had already sent the signal. The system answered instantly. You must understand this. The universe does not wait for you to get everything right before responding. It does not need elaborate rituals, long speeches, or frantic repetition. It responds to the clarity of your inner broadcast. When your internal state matches what you declare, emotion, certainty, identity, the field shifts immediately. Not always in visible form, not always as an obvious trophy. But the response begins the moment your frequency aligns. Contrast that with hoping. Hoping is like yelling into a canyon and wondering why the echo sounds distant. Hoping carries fragmentation. Part of you wants, another part doubts. A third part tugs you toward contingency. That broadcast is muddy. The field receives it, but it doesn't know what to do with the mixed signal. So it mirrors the mixture. It drip manifestations, delays, surface coincidences that feel like crumbs instead of the feast you've been calibrated for. Aligned broadcast, on the other hand, is nor yelling. It's a tuning fork struck and held, vibrating purely, with no internal disagreement. The universe hears the clear tone and replies with exact resonance. Picture your internal state as a transmitter and the world as an array of receivers tuned to you. When your transmitter is flickering, hope flickers, doubt interferes, fear wobbles. The message arriving is full of noise. That noise forces the system to interpret, to delay, to compensate. But when your transmitter holds steady, when you feel internally the reality of what you are declaring, the signal arrives with no delay. It's like turning on light in a dark room. The room doesn't take time to decide whether light is coming. It's there instantly. Shadows rearrange because the frequency has been set. This is why what you feel before you act matters more than what you do to force the result. A confident decision voiced from a fractured inner place produces dissonance in the field. A quiet and knowing, unshaken by external noise, flows outward like a tide that doesn't crash. It simply arrives. Practice this law in 2 layers. First, internal calibration. Right now, close your eyes and recall one desire you've been pushing for. One you've been repeating like a chant, but haven't seen shift. Feel the emotion behind it. Then ask yourself, is there a part of you that's still waiting for proof? Is there a whisper of, what if it doesn't work beneath the surface? Name it silently. Then, with breath, let that fragment settle and replace it with a simple declaration in present tense. I am already aligned. The signal I send is clear. Feel the difference physiologically, the steadiness in your chest, the lack of tightening in your throat, the internal silence that isn't emptiness, but centeredness. Hold that frequency for 60 seconds. Second, external action. Choose one small move that reflects that internal clarity, not to force the outcome, but to mirror the inner signal. If your desire is recognition, send a concise message that carries your new tone. Don't oversell, don't hedge. If your desire is creative flow, begin with the first imperfect version, knowing your internal frequency already has it complete. The universe will mirror that clarity back into your visible reality, often by making space, by aligning people, by opening the path without strain. Calibration checkpoint? If after declaring and acting you feel nothing shifted externally in the next 48 to 72 hours, don't panic. Use these 3 filters. Now 1. Fragment check. Are you still carrying hidden ifs or buts inside? Those silently contradict your broadcast. Write them down. Then cross them out loudly in your mind and reaffirm your clean signal. Now, attachment interference. Are you gripping the outcome so tightly that the desire has become a pressure instead of a pulse? Release it. Affirm the intention and let the knowing breathe. 3. External absorption. Have you been unconsciously borrowing other people's frequencies, fearing someone else's judgment, aligning to someone else's timing? Return to your center. Reclaim your signal. This law doesn't mean nothing ever goes wrong. It means the real work happens before external friction shows up. If your frequency is aligned and a delay still appears, you use those delays to refine, not to doubt. You ask, what else in me needs clearing so the next layer of alignment is even more transparent? And here is the identity shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who has to convince the universe with repeated askings. You become the one who broadcasts, and the universe, in its responsiveness, mirrors that broadcast. You don't plead. You don't over-explain. You declare from the place of knowing, and then you act in small congruent steps, each step a reflection, not a chase. The difference is felt. It's the difference between shouting for attention in a crowded room and simply turning on the light in a dark corner. The room rearranges itself around the light, not because it was begged to, but because light was present. Now, take a breath and listen. Feel the immediate ripple when you align. It's already happening. The field has acknowledged your clarity. There might be no traumatic flash. Maybe the door opens slightly. Maybe a conversation shifts. Maybe a piece of information arrives that feels like validation. That's the universe's subtle echo of your pure frequency. Notice it, name it, and let it anchor your trust. Slow the pace for a moment. You are not in a race with time. The law is not about speed and frantic bursts. It's about integrity in resonance. When your inner signal is clean, the world responds. When it doesn't, you don't punish yourself. You recalibrate. This is mastery emerging. Listening for the feedback, adjusting gently, and continuing from a clearer place. Sit with this. Breathe into the knowing that what you feel now is already beginning to shape what comes next. You've felt the current, and you've heard how it responds. Now comes the shift that separates those who whisper from those who move reality. The move from asking to commanding. There's a difference not subtle between "please may it be so" and "it is so." One posture opens with hesitation, the other steps into presence. In a coastal town, Elias played guitar in a small cafe. He'd been there for years, never hopeful someone would notice his talent. Every night, he played the same songs, eyes lowered, waiting for applause as if it needed to be earned with extra notes, extra explanations, extra rehearsals. Then one evening, after a quiet day of worrying about rent, he paused, set his guitar aside, and said to himself, not as a wish, but as fact, "I am music. People come here to feel what I carry." He didn't ask the room to listen. He held the posture of being the sound itself. That night the atmosphere shifted, the cafe emptied, but the few who stayed leaned in. A music producer, passing through, felt drawn. Not because Elias begged for a meeting, but because the vibration of certainty in his being uncluttered the space and made room for alignment. You must understand the spiritual law behind this. Asking treats what you want as external, separate, something you don't yet possess. So you cast the energy outward with a hollow edge, hoping the universe will fill that absence. Commanding is different. Commanding doesn't mean forcing or aggression. It means speaking from the place of identity that has already absorbed the outcome. It is not arrogance. It is alignment with the truth that the force you're tapping into already holds the pattern. When you command, you are not begging the world to rearrange itself. You are simply recognizing the current shape it takes when you become its expression. Contrast the two broadcasts. Asking is a fractured frequency. It carries desire, uncertainty, possibility, and fear, all tangled. It sounds like, I hope this happens, or maybe if I do enough, then. Commanding is a clean resonance. It sounds like, this is done, or I move as this truth. The former leaves room for the world to negotiate, to set conditions, to delay. The latter plants a stake inside you, a point of internal authority, and the world, responding to the coordinate you've established, begins to align. The difference feels like walking into a room and saying, "Do you mind if I sit here?" versus sitting with the quiet assumption that this place is part of your territory. One invites permission. The other operates from sovereign presence. Imagine you're a conductor in front of an orchestra. Asking is waving a tentative hand. hoping the musicians pick up the rhythm you're thinking. Commanding is lifting the baton, feeling the whole piece pulse through you, and allowing the sound to unfold because you are already in rhythm. The orchestra doesn't need convincing. It responds because you are the frequency that carries the music. That's the internal shift, not trying to earn the note, but being the note. So the outer performance cannot help but follow. This is the moment you change your personal narrative. Instead of, will I be seen if I speak? You move to, I am seen when I speak. Instead of, can I attract this? You hold, this is already drawn to me because I am its match. The force behind the desire doesn't care for your begging. It listens to your declaration. Practice this now. First, internal. Pick one area where you've been asking, maybe for recognition, opportunity, trust, clarity. Close your eyes. Sense the habitual language that lives below the surface. If only. Maybe someday. I wish. Acknowledge it, then breathe and rephrase it in present tense authority. Don't say, I hope to be trusted. Say, I am trusted because I act from integrity. Don't say, I wish for a breakthrough. Honor her. Say, breakthrough is flowing through me. I am its vessel. Feel the weight of those words settle into your bones. Commanding doesn't vibrate with anxiety. It vibrates with quiet certainty. Allow your body to mirror that. Drop tension, straighten posture, soften the face into calm confidence. Second, external. Choose one small visible expression of that command. If your internal command is about value, then send the message or make the move that reflects it without padding or apology. If your command is about creative impact, release a piece of work without over-explaining. You are not proving, you are expressing. The world will respond, not because you shouted louder, but because you now stand in a different field. Calibration, again, is your safeguard. If the outer world doesn't immediately reflect your command, don't slide back into asking. Instead, use these filters. 1. Interior check. Does any leftover what if or maybe I'm not enough still vibrate under the surface? Those quietly dilute the command. Name it. Then reaffirm the declarative truth until the internal conflict softens. 2. Action alignment. Are your external actions consistent with your command? Or are they still flavored with hedging language, qualifiers, or over-explaining? Trim the unnecessary. A command needs fewer words, not more. 3. Attachment drift. Are you attached to a specific outcome or timing so tightly that the command becomes a clinch instead of a release? Loosen the grip while holding the identity. I am stays. The how and when remain flexible within that sovereignty. This is not about pretending. You do not fake being in authority. You own it because the force inside you already is. When you move from asking to commanding, you stop negotiating with possibility. You stop placing your power outside the exchange. Instead, you become the source code, the original pattern, sending a clear executable instruction into the field. Notice how different it feels when you speak from that place. There's less effort and more alignment. There's less pushing and more resonance. The world doesn't resist in clear command. It sinks. That doesn't mean the path is always smooth, but the friction that remains now serves as information, not punishment. You'll recognize the difference because commanding carries the quiet confidence to keep going, even when the surface looks ambiguous. Tether this identity. Before you speak, decide. Am I asking or commanding? If the old language creeps in, Pause, recenter with your internal declaration, then act. Over time, the muscle gets stronger. The nervous system begins to accept this as your default frequency. Slow the tempo now. Let the transition settle. You aren't doing more. You're being more aligned. The force inside you isn't waiting for permission. It's waiting for you to stop negotiating with what's already true. You are the authority of your own field. Speak from it. Live from it. Watch how the world, in response, rearranges itself, not because you demanded, but because you recognized and became. You've seen the force, heard its immediate response, and stepped into commanding. Now you encounter the most common sabotage, divided energy. You want something and simultaneously doubt it. You demand change while holding the question of whether you deserve it. You step forward while unconsciously leaning back. That split, the tug between hope and hesitation, desire and disbelief, creates spiritual friction, delay, and noise. The field cannot deliver purely because you're broadcasting a two-tone signal. Part of you is ready. Part of you is still negotiating. The moment you unify, when the internal conflict collapses into a singular decision, the current flows without resistance. Lena had spent 8 years oscillating between planning her creative brand and waiting for the perfect moment. She built spreadsheets, drafted content, rewrote headlines, and every time she got close, something inside whispered, "Not yet. What if it fails? What if they don't get it?" She existed in a loop of action and rollback, moving forward 2 steps, then retreating 3. One morning she sat at her kitchen table, stared at the blank page, and instead of asking permission from herself again, she'd said, "I choose to show up fully today. I'm done waiting for a signal outside of me." That sentence was not wishful. It wasn't. "I hope to be ready." It was an unambiguous decision. She published the piece that afternoon, imperfect but whole. The next week, a collaborator reached out, not because she chased him, but because her unified signal cut through the fog. Energy that had been stuck in indecision finally had a channel. Manifestation followed the path she had opened by choosing. You must understand this principle deeply. Divided energy dilutes. When you hold both "I want this" and "I'm not sure if it's possible," you create interference patterns inside yourself. The universe doesn't know whether to respond to the desire, the doubt, or the internal negotiation. It pauses, not because it's slow, but because the instruction it's receiving is ambiguous. Unity, by contrast, is the equivalent of clearing the static and speaking one unmistakable truth. The moment you decide, not hoping, not wavering, not hedging, you send a singular, coherent frequency. That decision is a declaration to the field that the internal battlefield has ended. Alignment begins. Contrast the old dance with the new. Before, you tried to balance aspiration and risk avoidance, saying things like, "I want to grow my business, but maybe I should wait until the market feels safe." Or, "I desire connection, but if I reach out and they don't respond, I'll look needy." Those are 2 competing broadcasts. The universe echoes back with partial responses. Projects that stall, relationships that remain lukewarm, momentum that sputters. Unified energy doesn't negotiate. It doesn't hedge with ifs or maybes. It says, "I am proceeding," and aligns the field accordingly. The difference isn't subtle, It's the difference between a leaking pipe spraying water sporadically and a newly installed conduit carrying the full flow. Think of your internal state like a river with multiple tributaries pouring into one bed. When those tributaries are separate, hope pulling left, fear pulling right, the water's surface churns and stagnates. The current can't build pressure. It spills weakly in every direction. When you stop redirecting parts of your own stream, when you choose clearly and close the forks, causing swirl, the river deepens and moves with force. That choice to unify is not suppression of caution. It is the integration of insight and commitment. You don't kill awareness, you choose which voice leads. Practice this unification now. First, internal. Bring to mind a desire you've been caught in oscillation over, something you keep almost doing. Write down the conflicting voices. On one side, list the aspiration. I want to launch. I want to speak up. I want to be seen. On the other side, list the caveats. But what if? Maybe later. I'm not ready. Then, beneath both, write one sentence that removes the tug of war and makes the decision simple. I choose to launch now. I choose to speak with full presence. I choose to be seen. I step forward. Say it aloud with breath. Feel the internal space settle as the indecision dissolves. Second, external. Take a micro action that expresses that choice. If your decision is to expand, send the message you've been delaying. If your decision is to create, publish a piece and accept the imperfection as part of the unified flow. Don't hedge the delivery. No qualifiers. No just checking in prefaces. You don't say, if this works, great. You say, this is happening. That external gesture is the bridge confirming the internal unification. Calibration is essential. If after making the decision and acting, you find yourself slipping back into the old loop. Now use this checkpoint. 1. Conflict audit. Are there residual whispers trying to reclaim authority? Repeat the decision sentence again, this time adding, I release the doubt that wants to split me. That do? Feedback alignment. Did your micro-action reflect the decision with clarity, or did you soften it in delivery? Adjust. Send the same action again with less compromise. And 3. Attachment drift. Sometimes unity gets confused with rigidity. Reaffirm your commitment. Not I choose this path, while remaining adaptable on tactics. The decision stays. The method can flex. The identity shift here is subtle but seismic. You stop seeing yourself as a hesitant negotiator with reality, someone who waits for the green light from outside, and become the origin of motion. You don't wait for a perfect alignment of stars to act. You place your own beacon, the choice. That choice, once made without internal dissension, alters the gravitational field of your life. Now slow down. Feel the sensation of no longer pulling in opposite directions. There is a quiet relief in unity, a clarity that feels like removing a thick fog from a window, making the view beyond immediate and undeniable. You are not splitting your energy between possibilities anymore. You're directing it with intention. Let this new unified current sit in you like a quiet but constant hum. Notice how your breath changes, how your posture softens, how momentum begins to arrive in sequence instead of scattering. As the current moves faster and the changes begin to show, something unexpected often surfaces. Turbulence. Not outside, it's inside. Power accelerating without internal mastery becomes a cracked conduit. You feel exhilaration, then anxiety, momentum, then doubt, clarity, then scattered attention. That's the force magnifying everything, including unprocessed noise. When your inner frequency is unstable, the very thing that could channel transformation instead fractures it. The more immediate your manifestations become, the more vital your emotional calibration is, because the force doesn't just amplify what you want, it amplifies the temperature of what you carry. Joy becomes abundant flow. Fear becomes resistance. Scattered thought becomes chaos reflected in circumstances. Take Jonah again. After his breakthrough, the new alignment began pulling opportunities toward him like magnets. Deals appeared fast. Praise landed unexpectedly. But with success came a new battle. The fear of losing it, the pressure to keep performing, the internal chatter of, what if it slips? His excitement folded into tension. The great current that had lifted him now echoed his own worry back as client hesitation, second-guessing, and sudden small misalignments. He thought the force had betrayed him. Then a mentor, an old woman who'd watched him from the sidelines, said, "Power without peace is lightning without a rod, brilliant and destructive. You're amplifying without centering." Jonah realized the external acceleration was merely a reflection of internal dissonance. He began pausing before decisions, measuring the quality of his inner calm before he commanded the next move. That stillness didn't slow him. It made everything smoother, deeper, more aligned. You must understand this law. Emotional turbulence is not a failure of the force. It is its early signal that you've upgraded capacity without upgrading the channel. The force is neutral. It responds to the frequency you emit. And when that frequency carries spikes, fear, reactive anxiety, hidden stories, it broadcasts those exact distortions outward. What the world sees are the ripples, unexpected setbacks, miscommunications, relationships that wobble, decisions that misfire. The power increases your signal's reach. But if your internal landscape is jagged, the external outcomes will mirror the jaggedness. Mastery is not about suppressing emotion. It's about becoming the observer and conductor of it. You learn to feel the spike, name it, and choose whether you feed it or let it settle. Contrast what happens when you let the turbulence ride unattended versus when you tune it unchecked. You ride the highs thinking you're levitating and then crash into low-frequency fear that contaminates the next wave. You hesitate, overcompensate, or split your attention between preserving what's arrived and chasing what's next. Tuning, however, means you feel the surge, breathe into it, and smooth its edges before sending it outward again. You treat emotion like a signal gauge, not a runaway train. The force becomes a clear channel, still powerful, but now with direction, with integrity, with peace as its frame. Think of it like upgrading the electrical capacity in a house. You installed a new, higher output system. If the wiring is old, frayed, and overloaded, the lights flicker, appliances misbehave, and the whole system feels unstable. You could keep blaming the power source. Or you could strengthen the internal wiring, replace the old connectors, add grounding, install a stabilizer. Then the same current that once caused spikes now flows clean, warming everything evenly and powering new expansions without burning out the circuits. Your emotional system is that wiring. The force is the upgraded current. Your job is to keep the internal conduit clear, grounded, and responsive. Practice the mastery now. First, how internal. Identify the area where excitement is turned into tension, something that's growing fast and making you uneasy. Sit quietly and name the emotions without judgment. I feel pressure. I feel afraid of losing momentum. I feel scattered between success and self-protection. Say each one aloud, then breathe, and allow them to exist over 30 seconds each without trying to fix. Then ask, is this energy serving alignment or fracturing it? If it's fracturing, take a moment to anchor. Place a hand over your chest and say, I choose clarity over chaos. I center before I expand. Feel the revision in your internal frequency. Second, external. Choose a ritual to anchor your recalibration. It can be a pause before taking the next big action. 3 deep breaths and a brief internal check on your emotional tone. It can be a small movement sequence that signals to your nervous system. Inhale fully. Open your arms. Exhale, relax your shoulders. Or it could be writing a single line that reframes your success not as pressure, but as alignment. My growth is steady because I move from peace. That external ritual becomes your stabilizer, the rod that grounds your lightning so its energy can be directed without destructive scatter. Calibration checkpoint: when the intensity surges and you feel yourself pulled into reactive loops, run these filters. Mach 1. Temperature check. Is your internal state spiking into fear, urgency, or scarcity? If yes, pause. Label the spike. The act of naming softens its charge. 2. Alignment shift. After naming, ask, what would this feel like if it were flowing with calm confidence instead of jittery pressure? Sit with that felt tone for a full breath. 3. Rebroadcast. From that calmer place, restate your intention without forcing. I expand with grounded presence. And take the next step from that revised frequency. This is the identity shift. You stop seeing high speed and high output as evidence that you need to push harder. You recognize that depth and peace are not antithetical to power. They are its necessary structure. The new version of you doesn't get swept by every emotional storm. You feel, you know, you center, and then you act. The force is no longer something you ride. It is something you steward. Let this settle. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing your internal weather patterns, from not being tossed around by every gust. The turbulence isn't gone. It won't be. But you've learned the rhythm of it. You breathe into the moment before making it loud. The difference is palpable. Your actions begin to carry weight without force, and the outcomes start aligning not as frantic spikes, but as a steady cadence. Slow the rhythm now. Sit with the awareness that increased power demands increased care, not to dim it, but to steward it. The clear channel you're building is a declaration to the field. You are now ready to receive and move from a place where force is harmonized with peace. That harmonization is your next level. It's the platform from which everything else accelerates without tearing. What if I told you that nothing is small here? That every second you live, every flicker of thought, every feeling you entertain is a seed being planted, whether you meant to plant it or not. You've been treating the big moves like they matter most, but reality has grown in the quiet moments. Those insignificant seconds are the soil, the water, the light. Are you tending yours with intention, or letting weeds, old stories, unconscious fear, scattered worry crowd out the crop? In a sleepy town, May ran a modest bakery. Her pastries were good, but she'd lived for years in cycles of busy and burnout, thinking only the big weekend rushes mattered. Then one morning, instead of rushing to bake the headline item, she paused at the counter, closed her eyes, and whispered, Every moment I put love into the dough, I plant abundance. She did not make this a checklist item. She felt it. When a customer complained about a small delay, she didn't tighten. She smiled, adjusted, and kept her frequency steady. That day, the regulars noticed something different. Not the new recipe, but the energy in the place. They lingered. They brought friends. The big launch she'd been waiting for arrived naturally, weeks later, because the unseen garden she had been tending silently had become fertile. You must understand this. The universe doesn't only respond to the loud, the grand, the intentional asks. It is equally, if not more, shaped by replication. What you do repeatedly, what you feel habitually, the default broadcast in the background. Each thought, each emotion, each reaction is a seed with a signature. That signature determines the soil it lands in. If your internal default is scarcity, judgment, or fragmented hope, you're sowing stunted growth. If your default is alignment, gratitude, and quiet clarity, you're seeding a field that yields with its own gravity. Contrast this with the typical hustle narrative. Most people live like gardeners who only water once in a while, then expect a forest. They chase big opportunities while ignoring the daily pruning, the tiny adjustments, the presence that feeds the roots. You, now, begin to live like a master gardener. You pay attention to what you're planting unconsciously. You deliberately choose the next thought, the next emotional tone, the next micro-response. Here's a little surprise. The smallest conscious pause can change the harvest. That split second between reacting from old conditioning and choosing a new frequency, that's fertile ground. That's where you get to interrupt automatic weeds. You feel someone slight you, and your mind prepares the old script of resentment. Instead, pause, breathe, plant something different. I respond with clarity. That's a seed. 3 days later, the energy around that relationship softens. The world is not doing you a favor. It's reflecting the soil you've built. Practice this in 3 waves. First, awareness wave. For the next 24 hours, become a witness to your internal garden. Every time you catch yourself in a small internal loop, worry about money, a shadow of doubt, comparing, you don't judge, you label it. There's a scarcity thinking. There's comparison. Then ask, what seed was that about to plant if I left it unattended? Acknowledge, choose something different. Replace it with a small internal phrase. Abundance flows here. Or, I am enough in this moment. Feel the shift. Second, intentional replanting. Pick one area where results have been inconsistent. Trace back the daily micro-patterns. What were the habitual thoughts, the background emotions, the automatic reactions? Write them down in 2 columns. On the left, list the usual internal seeds, and I can't afford to fail. I'll wait until it's perfect. On the right, write the upgraded intentions that align with the reality you want. I grow through experimentation. I'm already moving forward. Each time you catch the old seed trying to sprout, gently pull it and plant the new one. Say it aloud. Then take one micro-action that matches it. Send the message. Start the little task. Make the small offering. Third, external reinforcement. Choose an anchor that reminds you of your default garden. It could be the scent of something, a soft sound, a physical touch, pressing thumb and forefinger together, that you pair with planting a high-frequency seed. Each morning, when you activate the anchor, declare the season's crop. Today, I cultivate clarity, Today, I plant decisions that align. Use the anchor midday if you feel drift. These small external cues keep the unconscious from reverting to old wild growth. Calibration checkpoint, because even gardens need weeding. 1. Root audit. If outcomes feel off, ask, what have I been unconsciously planting? Check your background mental loop for repeated narratives. Netmer o frequency mismatch. Are your big actions trying to override the small internal seeds that contradict them? If you're loudly projecting confidence while quietly nursing doubt, the harvest will be confused. Align the interior first, then the exterior. 3. Neglect notice. Have you forgotten to tend at all? Long periods of autopilot broadcast default seeds. Reset by returning to the awareness wave. Label, choose, plant. The identity shift here is powerful but quiet. You stop waiting for external miracles and start stewarding internal soil. You stop wondering why progress stalls and begin asking what you've been feeding. The new version of you doesn't chase isolated events. You cultivate consistent grounds. That means patience with presence, not passivity. It means planting with intention and trusting the season. Now, for a moment, pause. Yes, actually slow down. Recall a situation where you expected acceleration from a big move and got flat results. Trace it back. What was the soil like? What narrative had become unconscious fertilizer? Then imagine the same scenario. But this time, you intervened before the moment. You caught the thought, replaced it, acted from calm alignment. Hold that alternative in your mind like a seed ready to sprout. There's power in this mundane mastery. The force you've remembered responds not only to big swings, but to the constant undercurrent you carry. By choosing each moment, you bend time, not by forcing speed, but by creating continuity so dense the field no longer sees gaps to fill. It simply grows. Slow down with this truth. It's not boring. It's the foundation. The unglamorous tending is the reason the next flashpoint lands solid, not shaky. You are the gardener. You choose the seeds. You watch the field respond. You've seen that the force responds, that unified energy travels, and that turbulence demands tending. Now you build the scaffolding beneath all of it, rituals and anchors that make your frequency reliable, not intermittent. This isn't superstition. It's spiritual engineering. You create consistent channels so the field knows not only what you mean, but who you are when you mean it. Nadia was a freelance designer whose inspiration came in erratic bursts. Some weeks she rode high, producing work that felt inevitable. Other weeks she flailed, waiting for the muse to return. She caught herself blaming fickle creativity, until one morning she did something small and unusual. Before opening her laptop, she placed her right hand over her heart, breathed in 3 slow counts, whispered, "I attune to clarity," then sipped water deliberately. She didn't call it magic. She called it alignment, that tiny repeated sequence, done before every work session, became her anchor. Over months, the swings smoothed. The same idea still came, but now her nervous system recognized the start signal. The force didn't change. Your ability to hold it did. You must understand the difference between random peaks of alignment and a sustained frequency. Peaks are great. They feel like fireworks. But without anchoring rituals, they fade and you chase the next high. Rituals are the daily set point that keep your internal transmitter from drifting. Anchors are the deliberate actions, small sequences, sensory bookmarks that translate internal clarity into automatic, embodied response. They don't have to be elaborate. They have to be consistent and meaningfully tied to your internal frequency. Contrast the scattershot version of motivation you've probably written. Big intention on Monday, no follow-through by Wednesday, then guilt-fueled effort Friday that fizzles. That's no alignment system. That's reactive ping-pong. Now imagine instead a simple signal that says, before I move, I tune. You build a mini routine, 5 breaths, a phrase, a touch, a gesture that tells your body and the field, I am here, I am clear, I am broadcasting. That tiny ritual becomes your reset button, your returning point when drifting happens, your anchor in the storm. Think of rituals like the daily startup sequence of a high-performance machine. A race car driver doesn't just jump in and floor it. There's a check of systems, the feel of the wheel, the breath before the green light. That sequence primes the entire vehicle to operate from optimized alignment. Not because the engine suddenly becomes better, but because the driver and machine synchronize. You're the driver and the system. Your ritual tells your internal system, we're entering alignment now. The force responds by flowing through an optimized channel. Now here's a twist that keeps many people stuck. You assume rituals have to be big to count. Candle lighting, long journaling, extravagant affirmations. That's not flexibility. That's rigidity masquerading as discipline. The most potent rituals are the ones that fit into your rhythm and don't require you to become someone else. For some, it's a breath before a meeting. For others, it's running fingertips along the edge of a notebook and saying, I choose this frequency. For another, it could be a quick mental phrase as you close your eyes in traffic. Center, then proceed. You don't need a script written by someone else. You design a tiny signifier that says, alignment is now. Let me interrupt the flow for a second. Yes, this is deliberate. Ask yourself right now, what's your current startup ritual for your day? If the answer is nothing, you've been leaving the gate wide open and wondering why the system drifts. If you have one, how automatic is it? Does it feel like a checkbox or a seal that says, I'm tuned? That momentary self-inquiry is a micro-ritual too. Curiosity aligned with honesty acts like a recalibration ping. Practice in 3 layers. First, design your anchor. Choose something sensory. Touch, pressing thumb and finger. Sound, a soft internal phrase. Motion, a tiny shoulder roll. Or breath pattern. Pair it with a short verbal cue that encapsulates your frequency. I'm present. Clarity flows. I command calm. Do it consistently before the type of moments you want to hold. Before writing, before decision-making, before a conversation that matters. Anchor it 3 times a day for a week. Let the nervous system link the internal state to the external trigger. Second, build a gateway ritual. This is a slightly longer sequence you do to begin a distinct domain. The start of deep work. The shift into creation. The beginning of a day of influence. It could be, Mic 1, 5 deep breaths with your hand over your heart. Ta 2, naming aloud the intention in present tense. I operate from aligned force. My decisions flow with clarity. Nemen 3, a physical motion. Standing, stretching, releasing tension. Keep it under 2 minutes. The point isn't performance, it's ceremony to you. When that sequence plays, your internal frequency synchronizes and the field listens with expectation, not surprise. Third, reset microchecks. Drift happens. You'll catch yourself going mechanical, reacting from old templates, or losing the underlying tone. Create a pause ping, a cue during the day that says, check. It can be as simple as the buzz of your phone, a timer, or a habitual act, like standing to stretch. When it arrives, stop, ask, am I aligned? What's the internal temperature? Then run a condensed version of your gateway ritual, 2 breaths, internal phrase, and resume. These mini resets keep the energy from degrading into autopilot. Calibration checkpoint. If your rituals feel stale, ask. 1. Meaning decay. Has the anchor become mechanical, performed without felt alignment? Refresh it by re-infusing intention. Slow down. Remember why you started, and adjust the cue so it carries personal resonance again. 2. Timing mismatch. Are you doing the ritual too early or too late, before energy is available, or after you've already drifted? Shift it to the true entry point, the moment before you need the frequency, not after the momentum has already fragmented. 3. Signal saturation. Are you layering too many anchors, creating confusion? Simplify. 1 clean cue is stronger than 10 diluted ones. Choose the one that feels easiest to return to and lean into it. The identity shift this builds is subtle and durable. You stop relying on motivation spikes because you have structural alignment. You don't wait to feel like it, you trigger it. You become the person who doesn't need to brace for flow. You activate it. The ritual isn't the power. The ritual's the handshake between your conscious intention and your subconscious baseline. Once they shake, the force flows like it was always supposed to. Slow for a moment. Feel how this feels different than the raw push of willpower. This is quiet architecture beneath visible results. Your future self will thank you, not with fireworks, but with fewer interruptions, smoother momentum, and a field that responds before you have to force it. You've built the foundation, remembering the force, hearing its reply, commanding it, unifying your signal, stabilizing turbulence, and anchoring your frequency. Now comes the living proof, embodiment. You don't wait to become before you act. You act as who you already are. And the world shifts to match what you're being. This is not pretending. It's alignment in motion. In a small studio atop a bustling street, Amara sold handmade journals. She had always told herself she'd become successful when things felt a certain way. When the reviews piled up, when the sales numbers hit a mark, when the right influencer mentioned her. She was waiting to feel worthy before showing up fully. One afternoon, tired of the cycle, she changed the experiment. She began each interaction with the internal posture. I am the creator people seek out. She spoke as if her customers already believed in her craft. She dressed like someone whose work mattered. She priced with the quiet authority of someone who knew her value. The next week, a boutique owner reached out. Not because she'd begged for a feature, but because her presence had already broadcast the frequency of success. She wasn't acting a part. She was inhabiting the identity that had always been available to her. She simply stopped editing herself to fit conditions that didn't exist. I must understand this principle. Being precedes having. The universe doesn't respond to a future you that you're trying to sediment into existence. It responds to the you, now that's already vibrating with the state of that outcome. When you embody the frequency, in dress, in tone, in quiet internal steadying, you stop chasing results and start living from the attractor. That difference is a shift from effort to resonance. Contrast the two versions of yourself. The one who waits for external evidence before stepping forward, broadcasts lack. It's the energy of, I'll be confident when, or I'll accept the role if they first give me permission. That signal contains postponement embedded in it. The other version, embodied, says internally, I carry the authority already, and the external world begins to reflect that without you needing to cajole it. It's not arrogant, it's consistency. Your internal identity and external expression are no longer in friction. Imagine you're wearing a uniform of your future self before you arrive at the stage, not as costume, but as current. The way you sit, speak, offer a handshake, write that message, or make that decision carries the weight of someone who has already crossed the threshold. People feel it. Opportunities stop being distant and start feeling like natural intersections. That is embodiment, the unconsciously perceived magnetism that aligns systems. Here's something to keep fresh. Embodiment is not static. It's a fluid, ongoing decision. You don't arrive and check out. Every day, moment by moment, you choose who you will be in the presence of your intentions. If you slip back into, I'll become when, that's a small signal of drift and easy to correct. Practice this now with 3 entry points. First, internal audition. Close your eyes. Picture the version of you who has already achieved what you're after. What's her posture? How does she breathe? What words does she choose before speaking? Don't imagine a fantasy. Recall a time you felt a sliver of that energy, then expand it. Say quietly, I am already this. I carry this without needing proof. Notice how the tension in your body shifts. That's the internal tune-up. Second, external reflection. Choose one behavior to mirror that inner identity. If your embodiment is about leadership, take one decision today from the posture of someone confident. Delegate clearly. Hold a meeting with presence. Speak succinctly without over-explaining. If it's about creativity, release something imperfectly polished and call it finished. Without waiting for permission from external standards, the key is that your action doesn't precede your identity. It reflects it. Third, language alignment. Listen to your internal narrative and the words you use with others. Replace conditional phrasing with present tense truth. Instead of, I hope to get more clients, say, I serve clients who value this work. Instead of, if I do this right, maybe they'll notice. Shift to I show up and they recognize. Language is frequency condensed into sound. When you adjust it, you don't have to fake anything. You simply stop watering the weeds of postponement. Calibration checkpoint. 3 filters to keep embodiment genuine instead of theatrical. 1. Felt congruence. Does your inner experience match your outer action? If you're acting from the identity but still feel imposter syndrome bubbling beneath, pause. Acknowledge the tension. Say, I embody this regardless of how I feel right now. Let the feeling catch up to the action. 2. Overperformance drift. Are you overcompensating to convince others you're the version you're being? Embodiment isn't loud hustle, it's quiet consistency. Pull back from the trying too hard and allow the natural flow of presence to carry the weight. 3. Feedback integration. Are external results reflecting the identity? Or are they still lagging because you're mixing in outdated language or hesitation? Audit your speech, your delivery, your decisions. Clean what's inconsistent. Trim the qualifiers. Shorten the explanations. Identity wants simplicity, not complexity. The identity shift here is subtle and brutal in its effectiveness. You stop waiting for one day and instead become day one. The version of you that used to hedge becomes the one who inhabits the field before the path is fully paved. You no longer ask permission from time, circumstance, or approval. You are the signal the universe responds to. Now listen, this is flexible. Embodiment doesn't require a rigid script. If today the expression is quiet confidence, tomorrow it might be bold vulnerability, depending on context. The underlying frequency remains. You are not less because your tone shifts. You are consistent because the intention beneath it stays anchored. That adaptability keeps you alive, interesting, and magnetic. Slow for a beat. Feel the gravity of that new default. Breathe it in. The small actions you take from here aren't attempts. They are demonstrations. The force doesn't need to chase the version of you it's been waiting for. It meets you where you are being. By now you've built alignment, anchored your frequency, embodied the force, and you're beginning to notice something delicate. What you allow into your field matters as much as what you declare from it. Your energetic space is sacred ground. Without guardrails, outside noise seeps in, old contracts replay, and your clear signal blurs into borrowed chaos. Protecting your field and dissolving inherited limitations are twin acts of self-sovereignty. One keeps your frequency pure. The other frees you from outdated programming that secretly reroutes your power. Tariq worked at a company where everyone praised the grind. He absorbed the unspoken belief from mentors, family, and culture. You have to struggle for what you get. Nothing comes easy. If it's smooth, you're probably missing something. That invisible contract lived beneath his confidence. He achieved results, but always with a tightness, a low-level resistance that made him overwork, over-explain, and never fully own his wins. I thought success would finally prove he belonged. But each win carried the undercurrent. I earned this through pain, so I must keep earning it to justify it. One evening, after burning out again, he sat down and wrote the phrase he'd never questioned: "I must struggle to be worthy." He read it aloud, felt the heaviness, and then crossed it out. He replaced it with a new agreement. Ease and excellence coexist. I am worthy now, not in debt to effort. That moment wasn't magic. It was reclamation. The next projects he took on felt less heavy. Doors began to open with fewer internal battles because the old vibrational contract had loosened. You must understand the subtle theft of inherited agreements. They are not always spoken. Often, they are the quiet, unquestioned stories passed down. You have to prove yourself before you relax. Asking for help means weakness. I'll only be safe if I control everything. These are energetic signatures you've been broadcasting, as if they were your own directives, and the universe responds to them with loyalty. Break them, and the system doesn't know how to act the old way anymore. It must adjust to the new signal. That adjustment is relief disguised as disruption. Your field clearing and reconfiguring to match a version of you that operates from freedom instead of conditioned limitation. Contrasts the unguarded field with the protected one. Unguarded. You absorb other people's emotional static. Arguments at work sit in your energy. Passive-aggressive emails become internal loops. Negativity clings like a film. You find your clear declarations dragging, watered down by secondhand resistance. Protected. You listen with compassion, but don't internalize. You build a filter. Other people's storms pass through you like wind around a tree, bending the leaves but not uprooting the roots. That doesn't mean you shut down. It means you distinguish between influence and infiltration. Think of your field like a garden with a fence. Without a fence, anything can walk in. Weeds, pests, unchecked opinions, and old scripts that try to replant themselves. With a fence, you can still invite pollinators, ideas, collaborations, feedback, but you decide what crosses the threshold. That fence isn't rigidity. It's sacred discernment. You're not afraid of energy. You manage its access. Practice this in 2 parallel streams. First, clearing and rewriting contracts. Make a list of the unspoken agreements you've carried that feel heavy or automatic. Write them as they sound in your inner dialogue. I have to earn love. Money is scarce unless I fight for it. If I slow down, I lose value. Pick the one that surfaces most often. Speak it aloud. Then ask, who gave me this? Does it serve my current identity? Cross it out physically and write its opposite, something freeing and true. I attract value through aligned presence. Rest deepens my contribution. I release others' definitions of worth. Say the new phrase until it resonates. Then observe where the old repetition shows up. Catch it as a ghost echo and gently replace it with a new contract. Second, protecting your field. Create energetic boundaries that feel practical, not mystical. Begin your day with a short ritual. Visualize a perimeter around your awareness, transparent but impenetrable to negativity that doesn't belong. You can use a phrase, only what aligns with my frequency enters. When you encounter someone draining or pulling at old patterns, pause and breathe. Then mentally step back from their energy. Thank them internally for their perspective. Then recenter. Use a physical anchor. Press your thumb and forefinger. Breathe in and say, my field is my responsibility. That small gesture reclaims the moment. Calibration checkpoint. If your clarity feels contaminated or old patterns creep back in, run these filters. 1. Agreement audit. What belief is secretly running the show? Journal it. Name its origin. Decide if it's still yours. Replace consciously. Tit. Boundary leak test. Which interactions leave residue? After certain conversations, take a moment and check. Do you feel heavy, reactive, apologetic, or insecure? If yes, you absorbed something. Reset with the anchor and reestablish the fence. 3. Signal bleed. Are you broadcasting other people's expectations instead of your own frequency? Ask, am I acting from misinherited musts or chosen agreements? If the former, pause, clarify, and realign to your rewritten contract. Here's a tactical twist to keep things fresh. Use surprise audits. Once a week, to randomly pick a moment and ask yourself, what contract is subtly influencing this? That question, unexpected, catches the autopilot. It breathes awareness into hidden grooves and prevents stagnation. The identity shift here is profound. You stop being a reactive vessel for cultural, familial, and relational programming. You become the curator of your own energetic terms. That means your alignment isn't just about generating power. It's about protecting its integrity and reclaiming authorship of your story. Your field becomes a place others feel, but they don't own. Now, slow. Take a breath. Feel the difference between the drained version of you who absorbed and replayed old stories and the version who filters, edits, and chooses. That version carries space. It isn't crowded. The force inside you doesn't have to fight for clarity anymore. It flows uninterrupted because you've cleared the contracts and sealed the fences. There's a moment when possibility hangs in the air like fog over a valley, thick with maybe, could be, someday. Most people let that fog linger, waiting for more data, clearer signs, safer conditions. That's the gap where time stretches and nothing moves. Then there's the other kind of moment, the one clear, irrevocable decision that collapses years into an instant and makes what felt distant arrive with reverence. That decision doesn't negotiate with uncertainty, it cuts through it. It isn't a wish. It's an alignment so complete that reality has no choice but to fold itself around it. Genevieve had been designing dresses for 15 years. Her sketchbook held the visions that could have transformed her into a name. But she kept saying, maybe next year, after I refine this, once I feel ready. Time accumulated like dust on the cover of that book. One quiet afternoon, she went to her studio, opened the sketchbook not to plan but to declare. She placed her palm over the design that had lived in her mind for years and whispered, "No more maybes. I launched this collection now." The decision wasn't a wish. It was a collapse. Within days, a boutique owner who had admired her work from afar reached out. Not because she'd been marketed to, but because the frequency of that decision rippled through the field. Clear, unambiguous, irreversible. What had felt like a timeline of years folded into a single chosen point. You must understand what happens when you make a decision like that. Time isn't a river you wait to float down. It's a fabric you press your certainty into, and it ripples forward. Indecision stretches possibility into a slow drip. Decisive alignment collapses it into a surge. This isn't mystical bypassing of process. It's the energetic truth that when you stop splitting your signal with maybe and later, the field reconfigures, not because the universe is imposing something on you, but because you've stopped asking it to negotiate. You've declared. The force that's always been inside you responds by bending the timeline to match the internal coordinate. Contrast what you've done in the past with what's possible now. Previously, you might have said, "I'll start the project when the budget is right," or "I'll speak up once I feel confident," or "I'll commit when everyone else approves." That's conditional time, waiting for external alignment before generating internal clarity. The new way flips the script. You create internal clarity with your decision, and the external world shifts to meet that clarity. Decision collapses the causality chain. It's not about forcing. It's about moving from a place where you're no longer split between wanting and waiting. Imagine standing at a crossroads with hundreds of signs pointing in every direction. You could study each sign, gather more opinions, weigh risks, and slowly inch forward. Years pass and you're still analyzing. Or you could choose a path with certainty. Plant your foot. And the other paths recede, not because they disappeared, but because your intention created a new dominant current. That's the collapse of time. The moment your internal frequency stakes a claim, and the universe adjusts its flow to accommodate the new trajectory. Practice this. First, internal. Identify one area where you've been hovering, one choice you've delayed, looping through pros and cons, waiting for perfect clarity. Write down all the conditions you've been using to justify the delay. Then ask yourself, if I made this decision right now, what would it feel like? Allow that felt certainty to rise. Speak it clearly in present tense. I choose to launch, speak, commit, change today. Don't temper it with if or when. Feel the shift as the internal space reorganizes. That's the collapse. Second, external. Take a concrete action within 24 hours that confirms the decision. If you decided to launch, publish the first version. If you decided to speak your truth, schedule the conversation. If you decided to change direction, send the message that credits the choice. That action isn't about proving the decision. It's about aligning with it and anchoring it in the world. The combination of decision plus congruent action informs the field that this is no longer a possibility. It's reality being lived. Calibration matters because not all decisions feel monumental. Some feel small and get diluted by outdated patterns of hesitation. Use this 3-part filter when you sense drift back into conditional waiting. Now 1, clarity check. Did your internal phrase include qualifiers? If you hear, I choose to try instead of I choose to do, revise it. Remove the softeners. The decision needs heft, no wiggle room. 2, follow through alignment. Did your action mirror the decision? Or did you hedge it with backup plans and escape routes? A true collapse doesn't leave side doors open. Seal the small disclaimers that whisper escape. Move from I'm going to launch unless to I launch. 3, feedback reading. If the external world doesn't shift immediately, avoid the trap of re-questioning the decision. Instead, ask, what minor adjustment of alignment is needed? Maybe the initial action needed a clearer signal, or maybe hidden internal doubts are still whispering. Refine, don't rescind. Here's a flexible twist that keeps it interesting. Not all major decisions need to be seismic to collapse time. You can practice mini collapses, small decisive shifts that train your system. Choose a small habitual delay. I'll reply to that message tomorrow becomes I reply now. I'll start the outline later becomes I begin this paragraph. Those micro decisions build the muscle for larger ones by shortening the feedback loops and reinforcing the internal truth that time responds to committed clarity. The identity shift here is profound. You stop carrying the weight of future hope and begin living from present commitment. You are no longer the person waiting on external validation to move. You are the one who chooses, and the timeline itself bends to your aligned directive. That becomes your new default rhythm. Decide, act, adjust, but never wait in the fog again. Slow for a moment. Feel the clean edge of a real decision. Let the energy of it settle in your gut. There's a subtle but undeniable relief in no longer oscillating. The fog clears. You see the path, not because everything is perfect, but because you declared it. That declaration is the seed. The action is water. Time responds by bringing growth forward in ways that surprise because you stopped leaving it to chance. You've already seen what happens when you remember the force. Command it, unify it, stabilize it, embody it, protect it, and collapse time with decision. Now here's a deeper pivot. The engine beneath the engine. The world doesn't rearrange itself because your strategy is elegant or your plan meticulous. It rearranges because you're feeling it's real. Emotion is not messy noise to be managed before you act. It is the signal the universe reads first. Logic builds maps. Emotion moves you. Logic tells you how emotion is the frequency that gets the field's attention. Glenn had the perfect plan. 5-year spreadsheets, milestones broken into micro steps, contingencies built like insurance policies. He was precise, efficient, and mostly stuck, a month after month. His careful logic created neat boxes with no expansion. Then one evening, worn out by the grind, he shut the documents, closed his eyes, and allowed himself something he hadn't given permission for in years. Raw feeling. Not the rehearsed optimism he pasted on top of stress, but the deep internal knowing of I want this, and I already have the capacity to live it. He felt it in his chest before he articulated it, within days. An unexpected mentor reached out with an offer that aligned with a dream he'd been planning for years, but couldn't move forward on. The plan hadn't changed. What changed was the frequency behind it. Glenn's system had finally broadcast from emotion instead of logic. And the universe answered, not slowly, not after more tweaking, but as a natural reflection of the new signal. You must understand this as law. Your emotional core is the transmitter. While logic arranges pieces, emotion charges the instruction. When your internal feeling matches the reality you speak, you aren't hoping, you're broadcasting. When you recite goals with no inner resonance, it's like sending a message in a whisper while the field listens for volume. That's why so many people can repeat affirmations mechanically and not see movement, because the words have no weight behind them. Feeling is the weight, contrasts the two approaches. Logic. First, people design the route, then hope the route carries them. Emotion-first people feel the destination so clearly that their steps rearrange themselves around that feeling. The former looks like over-planning, the latter like quiet certainty. One is a list, the other is a lived frequency. Suppose you're preparing for a conversation where you want to be heard. If you rehearse every line, logic, you might sound prepared. But if underneath there's anxiety, uncertainty, or a hidden lack of worth, the field picks that up. The message the world receives isn't your script, it's the internal tone. If you instead center, feel your value, breathe into the calm knowing that your voice matters, and then speak, the same words land differently. That's emotional alignment in action. Here's a surprise check-in. What have you been using as evidence of readiness? Is it a spreadsheet, a certification, a perfect condition? Those are logic crutches. The deeper substrate is the emotional clarity behind the move. Ask yourself, do I feel it? Or am I still trying to think my way into it? That question, simple, interrupts autopilot and brings you back to the signal that moves reality. Practice this now on 2 levels. First, feeling calibration. Choose one desire that has been stuck despite all your planning. Close your eyes. Drop the narrative about how to get there. Instead, feel the reality of its arrival. What does it feel like in your body? Is your chest open? Does your breath slow? Do you feel grounded or scattered? Name the feeling. Give it a phrase. I am abundant. I move with calm power. I influence without force. Let that feeling swell for 60 seconds. Don't try to manufacture it. Let it arise from knowing, even if faint. Let it become the center of your internal broadcast. Second, aligned action. Take the smallest next step that reflects that feeling. It doesn't have to be dramatic. If your emotional calibration is about leadership, have the conversation with clarity, not over preparing for every objection, but holding space from the place of, I lead because I understand. If it's about creativity, release a draft with confidence. No hedging language, no, I hope this is okay. That external act carries the emotional frequency into the field And the universe responds by making space, pulling in alignment, creating opportunities that match the depth of what you felt. Calibration checkpoint. Use this 3-part filter when you feel friction between your intention and the outcome. Manner 1. Surface logic override. Are you covering your inner feeling with explanations, justifications, or backup plans? Those are logic overlays drowning the raw frequency. Strip them. Return to the feeling before you act. 2. Emotional dissonance. Does your body send mixed signals? You speak with confidence, but your shoulders tense. You declare abundance while your inner dialogue whispers scarcity. Name the dissonance and realign the internal tone. Feel it first, then speak it. Manner 3, or reactive rebound. Are you defaulting to emotional reactivity, fear, defensiveness, when things shift instead of recentering in your chosen frequency? Pause. Return to the original feeling calibration phrase. Remind yourself, I move from clarity, not reaction. This is the identity shift. You stop idolizing strategy over sensation. You stop assuming that the next planned iteration will unlock what's been stuck. Instead, you become a person who feels first, then moves. Feeling becomes not a distraction from action. Feeling becomes the launchpad. The world, wired to respond to frequency, begins to synchronize. Not because you forced it logically, but because you finally matched internally what you intend externally. Let me give you a flexible edge. This is where boredom from predictability dies. Once you master feeling before doing, you can reverse engineer intensity. Some days, you overanalyze and need a shortcut. In those moments, instead of diving into another framework, go straight to feeling. Close your eyes, place your hand over the heart and say, I am enough. I move from that. That's the realignment. On high energy days, you can layer logic on top. Structures now support a frequency that already moves. That flexibility keeps your internal system from plateauing, because sometimes you lead with the raw charge, sometimes with refinement, always anchored in emotion. Slow down. Hold the feeling you created in your body. Let the field register it. The friction you used to encounter, plans that didn't land, efforts that felt hollow, begins to dissolve because your signal is no longer diluted by overthinking. You are not less intelligent for tuning to feeling first. You are more effective. Feeling is not softer, it is the clearest command. Now you move from launching the force into motion to keeping it from drifting. The difference between a spark and a sustained flame. Alignment isn't a one-time burst, it's a maintained frequency. The world doesn't just respond to peaks of intensity, it responds to consistency. That's where trust lives. Not blind hope, not brittle optimism, but the quiet confidence that your vibration, once it's set, will hold even when the surface shows gaps. This is the discipline of staying in the frequency that attracts, not slipping back into the default of reaction or renegotiation. Nan ran a tiny flower shop, and for years she toggled between fire and freeze. Some days she was magnetizing clients. Other days she was exhausted, doubting why the same energy disappeared. Then she discovered the difference between a flash and a foundation. Instead of waiting for the right feeling to return, she engineered the return. She chose 3 small anchors, the scent of citrus on her wrist in the morning, a brief internal phrase before each customer, I am the space that blooms, and a 5-second pause between taking an order and acting, just to reset. Those tiny consistent inputs built a steady current. Her days stopped riding waves and started flowing. Even when a slow afternoon came, the underlying rhythm remained. She didn't chase motivation. She maintained frequency. That maintenance turned her sporadic success into predictable influence. You must understand this principle. Sustained vibration is your secret infrastructure. Peaks without follow-through create fatigue. Stability creates momentum. Think of shooting off fireworks versus powering a lighthouse. Fireworks are dramatic, bright, gone. A lighthouse isn't exciting in bursts, but ships depend on it. Your frequency, once aligned, becomes that lighthouse when you stabilize it. The world starts rooting through you because your energy is a reliable signal, not a confusing flash. Contrast this with the old pattern of big surge, crash, reboot. You've done it? You burn with intention, then feel drift, then panic, then push again. An exhausting cycle that looks like progress, but often collapses because the system wasn't built to hold. What you're learning now is how to build structural resilience into your vibration. That means you don't wait to feel perfect to show up. You show up in a calibrated way that brings you back to center when the noise comes. The stability isn't passive. It's active tending. Here's a twist that keeps the practice alive instead of automatic. You intentionally create friction resets. Every day, pick a moment to introduce a small artificial friction, something that would normally pull you out of alignment, and use it as a test to return. It could be a difficult conversation, a minor technical glitch, a delay in expected feedback. Instead of letting that moment hijack your frequency, use it as an anchor point. Pause, breathe, name the drift, and reapply your internal frequency cue. That engineered disruption doesn't break your vibration, it strengthens it, because you've incorporated adaptability into its maintenance. Practice this in 3 concentric layers. First, daily microcalibration. Each morning, before any external input hijacks your field, spend 2 minutes assessing your baseline tone. Ask, what's my current frequency? Is it centered or scattered? Use a simple internal phrase to calibrate. I align with clarity. I trust the flow. I return to peace. Feel the posture inside as you say it. That becomes your daily reset anchor. It's not a performance, it's a checking in. Second, anchor refresh. You already have anchors. Now make them adaptive. Every 3 to 5 days, slightly vary one element so your nervous system doesn't habituate to autopilot. If your anchor is a phrase, add a sensory variation. Say it while touching something different, or say it in a softer tone, or pair it with a new breath pattern. If your anchor is a physical cue, add a new micro movement before it. Lift your chin, then press your thumb and finger. Variation keeps the signal alive and prevents the subconscious from treating it as background noise. Third, trust conditioning. Trust isn't assumed. It's earned by repeated alignment. Keep a journal of small evidence points, moments when your stabilized frequency produced something that matched your intention. Don't wait for big wins. Write the tiny ones. A conversation that flowed, an unexpected opening, a calmer reaction to stress. Review these weekly. That archive rewires doubt. When you look back, you don't need to debate whether the system works. You see a trail of consistent replies. That's how trust becomes automatic. You stop reacting to surface inconsistencies and lean on the deeper pattern. Calibration checkpoints for sustained vibration. Tiver 1. Drift signal detection. When you feel exhaustion masquerading as lack of progress, ask, Are you trying to restart or to recalibrate? A restart is a reset of identity. Calibration is an adjustment within the same identity. Use your micro anchor. 2 breaths, internal phrase, small movement, and re-establish tone before pushing again. 2. Autopilot alert. Are the anchors becoming mechanical? If you find yourself reciting the phrase while your internal state is disconnected, slow down, pause, reveal the meaning, adjust the anchor's form or timing so it regains intentionality. 3. Overcorrection trap. Are you trying to maintain frequency by forcing serenity instead of allowing real emotion to pass through? True stabilization isn't numbness. It's the ability to feel the full range and return to center. Let discomfort move. Hold your frequency as a middle ground, not a frozen state. The identity shift here is subtle but enduring. You become less of a reactor to external tides and more of a consistent current. People begin to rely on your energy because it's predictable in its presence, not because it's dull. That predictability isn't stagnation, it's trustworthiness. You're the force that others feel before they understand why. Here's one flexible edge to keep it from getting stale. Schedule creative shocks. Once a week, intentionally change the medium or context in which you reinforce your frequency. Record your internal phrase as audio and play it back. State it in a different language or accent, pair it with a new movement, or switch the location where you do your morning calibration. The combination of stability and variation keeps your nervous system engaged. Your default frequency stays strong, but your practice doesn't become rote traffic. Slow now. Breathe in the knowing that steady power doesn't need drama to be effective. You are not a flicker. You are the lighthouse. The force inside you isn't a flash you chase. It's a current you maintain. That maintenance, the daily microchecks, the adaptive anchors, the trust archive, is the invisible work that makes everything else effortless. Not because the world changes overnight, but because your field holds its tone and the field around you begins to harmonize with that steadiness. All the pieces you've gathered, remembering, commanding, unifying, stabilizing, embodying or protecting, deciding, feeling, trusting, were never separate tricks. They were a path inward. Now you arrive at the deepest truth, the one that makes the rest unnecessary and infinitely richer. You are not a user of the force. You are the force, not a vessel waiting to be filled, not a conduit trying to channel something external. You are the current, the field, the unseen pressure shaping everything around you. Lillian spent decades jotting down lucky breaks in her journals, trying to reverse engineer why doors opened, why ideas landed, why moments aligned. She collected outcomes like trophies and called them coincidences. One evening, dusty from the weight of searching, she sat at her old piano, silent for years, and placed her hands on the keys. Instead of playing to be heard, she simply let her breath match the rhythm of the truth pounding in her chest. The music wasn't coming from her. It was through her. Every note was already there. She was the vibration giving it form. In that moment, she didn't ask for flow or chase inspiration. She remembered that the current had always been moving through her. She was not separate from it. The sound that filled the room wasn't performance. It was presence. The universe stopped being something outside doing things for her. It became movement as her, moving through her. You must understand this. All the alignment, all the rituals, all the decision, they don't grant you power. They clear the static so the realization can land. When you finally see that the force isn't a tool to be wielded, but the essence you are expressing, everything shifts again. The urgency to make it work softens. The pressure to earn it dissolves. You stop hunting energy and start being it. The difference feels like ceasing to paddle in rough water and discovering you've been flowing with the river because you are the river. Contrast that old identity, seeking, pushing, negotiating with this expanded one. Before, you treated the force as something outside you, something to manage, not optimize, coax. You held it at arm's length, always checking if it was enough, if you'd done the right thing to get it to respond. Now you see, the force isn't a guest in your house. It is the architecture. When you act from this knowing, your actions are no longer attempts to impress reality. They are expressions of its unfolding. You don't fit yourself into possibility. Possibility unrolls around you because you are its vibration. Think of yourself as the source code that everything else is running on. The field doesn't duplicate you, it reflects you. Change the code, the internal frequency, and the entire output shifts, not because you request it, but because it was always rendering from your state. That's mastery, not in control, but in recognition. You no longer fear loss because loss was based on the old story of separation. You are not separate from what you attract. You are the attractor. Practice this final integration in 3 layers. First, recognition. Take a quiet minute and put your hand on your heart. Breathe slowly. Say to yourself, I am not outside the force. I am it. Don't rush past it. Feel the ripple of that sentence through the body, the soft expansion in the chest, the internal settling that isn't grandiosity, but alignment. Let the old reflex to qualify it. I am the force, then if I do this right, or I am the force, when I achieve that, fall away. I'll repeat it again. Cleaner. I am the force. Hold that frequency. Second, permeation. Move through a simple act as that force. It could be making a decision, sending a message, creating something small, responding to someone with presence instead of reactivity. Before the external move, breathe. Feel your internal state and as the force, then act from that state, not trying to change something outside, but allowing what's already moving through you to carry the action. Notice how different the energy of the same task feels when your origin is not from lack, but from source. Third, refinement. Integrate the new default into your language, your metrics, your internal feedback. Replace I want with I am, not to inflate ego, but to reflect essence. Replace I need to earn with I choose from. When friction shows up, old separation stories, doubt, second guessing, don't blame yourself. Instead, remember the practice of calibration. Feel the misalignment, breathe it in, and gently return to the baseline phrase. I am the force expressing itself now. That phrase becomes a soft compass, not a commandment. Calibration checkpoint. Even this realization wants nuance. If you find yourself slipping back into, I have to make the force happen, or maybe I'm not enough to be the force, run the 3 filters. 1. Separation echo. What language are you using that implies outside again? If I become, then, or when I prove it, then I'm powerful. Clean it. Return to self as source. 2. Performance creep. Are you layering effort over essence, trying to earn what is already inherent? Pause. Drop the extra. Let the movement flow from who you are instead of what you do. 3. Identity drift. Do you still define your worth by outcomes instead of origin? Re-anchor with the recognition breath, hands over heart, internal pulse, acknowledgement that your existence is the current that makes manifestation possible. Here's the flexible edge. Knowing you are the force doesn't lock you into a single version of yourself. It liberates you to experiment, to fluctuate, to soften, to escalate, because the core isn't changing. Some days, your expression is calm presence. Other days, it's fierce clarity. Both are the same current, showing different surfaces. That adaptability makes you interesting, alive, unpredictable in the best way. Because you're not performing for external measurement, you're continuously revealing what's already true. The identity shift here is the deepest. You stop asking the universe to cooperate. You stop waiting to be filled. You begin to move as the field itself, carrying the same gravity whether anyone notices or not. That is rest and movement combined. That is power without seeking. So now, in this moment, feel the continuity. Everything you've done wasn't building something new outside of you. It was clearing the view so you could see yourself. Walk forward, not as someone who uses force, but as force expressing, refining, and choosing, steady, fluid, present. Slow down. Let the rhythm soften. You've run through the arc, awakening, activating, mastering, and now you rest in the knowing. The pressure to perform, to prove, to push hard enough to be worthy, loosens. You don't have to earn the current. You simply return to it, again and again, like coming home to a room that's always been yours. There's a quiet power in that return. The force doesn't demand perfection. It invites presence. The practices, decisions, rituals, and calibrations were never about producing a new identity. They were about remembering and refining the one already pulsing beneath. Sometimes you'll feel disruption, doubt, drift. That's part of the unfolding, not failure, but recalibration. Each time you pause, I breathe, realign. You deepen the trust. You are the force, not someday, not after the evidence, now, in the small choices, in the silent breath, in the way you carry yourself when no one's watching. Keep tending the field. Protect it. Speak from it. Move as it. Let it be the quiet compass guiding everything that rises. You've arrived. The door wasn't locked. You just needed to remember to open it and walk through.